All right. Maybe we can make a start. There will be a slight change to our program for today. I will be starting with an introduction to everyone here, and then once our colleague is available, perhaps we can have the introduction and welcome to the project at a later time. So hi everyone, I hope that you're all doing well. Thank you for taking the time to be here. This is very exciting collaboration for us. This webinar is under the Breathe In project that has to do with the monitoring the quality of indoor air in advanced education institutions and how that might be affecting academic performance, etc. But this webinar that we have today will focus mostly on the role on air pollution, biodiversity, and green buildings. So I would like to warmly welcome you to this webinar. And then it's important to also share that this event is under the umbrella of the European Public Health Week, organized by the European Public Health Association, supported by the WHO Regional Office for Europe, and co-funded by the European Union. The European Public Health Week aims to raise awareness about public health and promote collaboration among the public health community in Europe. It is an annual initiative that began in 2019 and keeps on growing. The theme for this year's week is Health as a Political Choice, highlighting the interplay between politics and health to create sustainable change for better health in the future. The specific theme for today, Wednesday, May 15th, is Planetary Health, a Global Approach. Global representing the amalgamation of global and local actions. Therefore, our event today is best aligned with today's topic, exploring how air pollution affects biodiversity and the role that green buildings have in promoting sustainable development and human health. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, a dear colleague, Dr. Charalambidou. Dr. Charalambidou is a biologist who specialized in ecology in North Wales and the Netherlands. She has been involved in ecological and avian research and conservation for more than 20 years, with a focus on wetlands in Greece, Wales, England, the Netherlands, Denmark, and since 2003 in Cyprus. Since 2010, she works in academia and teaches on the bachelor degree in human biology at the University of Nicosia. Her interests include research on biodiversity with a focus on avian ecology, wetland and cave ecology, birds as indicators of microplastic contamination, avian carriers of zoonotic diseases, and environmental education and awareness. Dr. Charalambidou, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cristina, for your very nice introduction. Thank you also for inviting me for the Breathe In project, inviting me to this to give a presentation. And I've just shared my screen. I hope everyone can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you, Cristina. Okay, thank you. So as Cristina mentioned, I'm a biologist and ecologist, and I teach on the human biology program at the School of Life and Health Sciences at the University of Nicosia. I would like to thank you again for inviting me to give this presentation, because as an ecologist, as I am on the Breathe In project, which has to do with air pollution, Edna invited me to give a presentation. And as an ecologist, I proposed I would like to talk about the impacts of air pollution on biodiversity. Because usually when we hear about the topic of air pollution, generally most of society think in a very anthropocentric way, and they usually think about air pollution in relation just to humans. And I would like to show today that air pollution also influences biodiversity, and actually biodiversity is essential for our survival anyway. So in a direct and indirect way, it also influences us. So I'm going to start the presentation with a couple of definitions. I'll mention very briefly just a few points why biodiversity is essential. And I just chose a few subjects where air pollution influences biodiversity because there are so many, and it was actually difficult for me to decide which ones to choose. So I chose 5 topics. So in relation to the definition of air pollution, it is actually the World Health Organization gives a general definition. Okay, and it's a change in the characteristics of the atmosphere. And in most definitions, in most places where I looked for the definitions, the main focus was changes in the characteristics of the atmosphere that adversely affect human health. So I actually searched a lot to find the definition which included human health, other living organisms, and the natural environment. Most definitions were focusing on human health and the built environment. So I would like to propose a more complete definition for air pollution. So a change in the atmosphere, the characteristics that affect human health, the health of other living organisms, and the health of the environment, as well as the natural environment and the built environment. And what is biodiversity? It is the variety of all living things that live, all living organisms that live on the planet. And it is also, it has to do with the interactions between these organisms. And I just put this picture here just to show you that these interactions it's a very complex system where there are lots of interactions between different parts of organisms that live in a system. And biodiversity includes animals, it includes plants, it includes fungi, and it includes microorganisms. Okay, so all the living kingdoms of organisms on the planet. And usually when we study biodiversity, we can study at different levels. And up until fairly recently, we used to focus either on the genetic diversity, which is the variation within a species, the genetic variation within a particular species. We also look at species diversity, how many species there are, differences in species. Ecosystem diversity, the diversity of various ecosystems. And also, fairly recently, in the last 10 years, we include phylogenetic diversity as another level of study, where we can check the evolutionary distance between different species. So biodiversity is studied at many different levels, actually. And why is biodiversity essential? And basically, it's essential for many reasons. As an ecologist, when I talk about this subject in ecology classes, I don't only focus on anthropocentric ideas, but for this presentation, I'm focusing on, I put as the first point that biodiversity provides everything that humans need in order to survive. Okay, so, and biodiversity supports healthy ecosystems, and also in relation to humans, it provides us with many economic opportunities and is essential for our well-being. Okay, so biodiversity, I'm just going to mention very few points why biodiversity is important. There is really a long list of things. We could talk for hours about it, so I just chose a few. So biodiversity is important for the functioning of ecosystems because ecosystems provide us humans with different services in order for us to survive, actually. So with the aid of biodiversity, we have nutrient cycling in the systems, basically. Without this kind of nutrient cycling, we wouldn't be able to have the crops and the food that sustains us. Also, we have different services provided by biodiversity. So cycling of nutrients in the environment, pollination, which is necessary for the reproduction of plants And I don't know if some of you have recently heard in the last few years about the crisis in the decrease in bee populations globally, and the fact that bees help in plant reproduction. And with this decrease, with this decrease in bee populations, it can actually impact crops and food production systems. So we have the ecosystem functioning. Biodiversity is very essential for food security for us. Okay, so our entire food system depends on biodiversity, and we actually, millions of species, as I say here, are consumed by us humans. There is actually, the last few years as well, lots of discussion about how the foods that we use, that the biodiversity of the food that we eat is decreasing. And that has an effect on the biodiversity of the microbes in our guts. So that is also decreasing. So this is a very big topic of research in the last 2 decades at least. So biodiversity also helps us fight diseases. Many of the medicines that most of the medicines that we use and the drugs that we produce actually come from nature. And so I'm just giving you an example here. 25% of drugs that we use in modern medicine are actually derived from plants that are found in the rainforest. Okay, and 70% of the drugs that are used to deal with cancer are products that are either found in nature or synthetic products inspired by nature. And at the moment in our department, some of my colleagues are studying the medicinal properties or the pharmaceutical properties of scorpion venom. We have scorpions in Cyprus, and viper venom. And other colleagues are studying the pharmaceutical properties of chemicals that we find in different plants. So actually, biodiversity is very important in this sense. And overall, biodiversity contributes to economic development, and it actually supports the livelihoods of many people around the globe. But as I mentioned before, I just mentioned these 3 main points, but there is a long list of reasons why biodiversity is important, is essential. There are some main categories of why biodiversity is being lost at the moment. And actually, at the moment, scientists consider that we are going through a biodiversity crisis. The last, maybe the last few decades. And many scientists consider that now we are going through the sixth major extinction event of life on the planet. And this is due to human activities. So the previous 5 very big extinction events.
Sim.
Is it possible to close this? The previous very big, large extinction events were actually because of climate change and natural causes. The one that we are currently going through is because of human activities. So as I mentioned before, I'm just going to focus on 5 points of how air pollution impacts biodiversity. But again, as I said before, I had to make a choice. There are many ways in which air pollution impacts biodiversity, and I just selected these 5 points. So, for example, with climate change, everybody is aware how increases in carbon dioxide emissions in the atmosphere and of other greenhouse gases is increasing the temperature on the planet, and also causing various other weather systems to collapse or to change. And some examples of climate change that are having a huge impact on biodiversity are, for example, the increasing wildfires that actually are happening around the globe every year. And last summer, we were just watching one after the other on the news throughout summer, these terrible wildfires taking place around the globe. And there were these terrible wildfires that took place in Greece in some very important Natura 2000 areas, which I visited in the past, which was the Evros Delta and the Vadia forest. And these are considered as top biodiversity spots in Europe. And they were burnt last year, they were destroyed in these wildfires. And I just took a snapshot of what happened last summer in Europe. And this just shows you on the 4th of August last year, how many wildfires were taking place throughout Europe on one day last year. Okay, it doesn't show Cyprus here. I actually have a friend who is a firefighter in Cyprus, and he told me that actually throughout summer, there are fires every day in Cyprus. It's just that they are not huge enough to be on the news, but every day there are fires. So this is one example of how climate change is impacting biodiversity, destruction of whole forested landscapes throughout the world. Another big example is coral bleaching. So with coral bleaching, because corals, which we can see over here, are a symbiotic relationship between the coral, okay, these things that you see here, these are the skeleton of the polyps. Polyps are small animals, and they are living in, this, for example, is a colony of polyps, and the white that you can see is the skeleton of different colony of polyps. And they have symbiotic relationships with different algae. And actually, because of climate change, because the temperature of the oceans is rising, this destroys the algae that live inside the coral. And this is called coral bleaching. So on the left-hand side here, you see a healthy coral ecosystem. And coral ecosystems are compared on land to tropical rainforests. So on land, tropical rainforests have the highest biodiversity in terrestrial systems. And in the ocean, coral reefs have the highest biodiversity in the ocean systems. So because of climate change, vast expanses, vast areas covered with coral are actually dying. So basically, coral bleaching means that eventually the corals die because the algae that live inside the cells are dying because of increasing temperatures. And because of this disruption, this actually, oh, sorry, I had another picture here. I've lost, sorry, it's not here anymore. This actually disrupts climate change, is actually destroying the most biodiverse ecosystem in the oceans. Okay, so this is another huge loss to biodiversity. And coral reefs are very important for the fishing industry, but also for tourism. So they actually support businesses in tropical areas. They bring in trillions of dollars to different countries around the world. So another big impact of air pollution on biodiversity is called ocean acidification. And as you can see here on the right, I have a title. It says, ocean acidification is the other carbon dioxide problem. Okay, so because of increasing levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, when the carbon dioxide ends up in the ocean, it actually combines with water and becomes carbonic acid. So since the Industrial Revolution, about in the last 200 years, the acidity of the ocean, okay, you can see here, the average acidity of the ocean, the ocean basically has become more acid. The pH has decreased. The pH of the oceans have decreased, and the oceans have becoming more acidic. And many organisms in the oceans are being impacted by this because if you think about it, many of the marine organisms have shells. Well, have, like, for example, like different crustaceans, different types of shrimps, different mollusks. Also, the coral reefs have calcium in them. So actually, this acid, carbonic acid, actually influences the exoskeletons of all these different types of marine organisms, and is actually making the populations of many of these organisms are crashing because they can't form their exoskeletons because the biochemical reactions are being disrupted by the carbonic acid that's in the seawater. And this is actually disrupting the food web in the oceans, because a lot of these organisms are actually at the bottom of the food web in the ocean. So many food webs are currently being disrupted, and this is having a huge impact on fisheries as well. So it has a huge environmental impact, but also a huge impact for people in the financial issues. So a third way in which air pollution can influence the environment is acid rain. This is a more well-known problem. So I guess everybody knows that because of the nitrous oxides and sulfur oxides that end up in the atmosphere because of combustion of fossil fuels mainly, these combine with water vapor in the atmosphere, and they become acids. And then when you have precipitation, the acid actually ends up on the land or in the oceans or in different marine environments or other aquatic environments, and it lowers the pH in soil and in surface waters. This also means in lakes, ponds, and rivers. Okay, so imagine what a lowering of the pH does to the animals, to the various animals that live, for example, in the soil or also in aquatic systems. When the pH, when the system becomes more acidic, for example, amphibians tend to breathe through their skin. Fish breathe through their gills. So a more acidic environment actually has a huge impact on many animal organisms. There is actually quite a lot of research on how acid rain impacts predominantly aquatic creatures and some aquatic and some terrestrial insects. So it has a huge impact on many populations of animals. And however, the most studies that are carried out on acid rain in terms of biodiversity focus on plants. And the reason for this is because acid rain changes the pH in the soils, and it has a very big impact on plant development. So it can actually damage the wax layer on the leaves of the plants. It can also change the composition in the soil, and it makes various nutrients leach out of the soil. So it's very difficult for plants to actually take up nutrients, and the soil becomes depleted of various nutrients. So actually acid rain affects plants at many different levels. And this here is an experiment which gradually shows how acid rain in the end kills off plants. And in a few decades ago, this was a very big issue in many industrialized nations in Europe and many industrialized parts of the US, because whole areas of forest were also being decimated due to acid rain. This was actually considered as a major issue maybe 20, 30 years ago. And some improvements in the quality of the air has actually decreased this problem in many parts of Europe. However, I've chosen here two studies to show you, the recent ones, to show you that actually the impact of acid rain on plants, and especially on crop plants, is still a big issue nowadays. So if you see here, this is a study from 2021, and it says effect of acid rain on plant growth. And here an overview of direct and indirect effects of acid rain on plants. Okay, so this is considered as a very big issue, and there are lots of studies nowadays on how acid rain can impact different types of cultivations. So this has a very strong link with food security. So I'm just moving on quickly so that I can manage to finish on time. Also, if you think about it, with the air pollutants that are in the form of gases, if you think about plants that are exposed to the atmosphere, and they have these openings on the leaves, which is through which these openings that they take in oxygen to breathe, and they get rid of carbon dioxide when they're breathing, or they take in carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, which is a process in which plants produce the different organic compounds that they use as for survival. So also, as apart from the gases that the plants need in order to survive, they also take in different gases that are in the atmosphere that are considered as pollutants. So one example of these is tropospheric ozone. Okay, so tropospheric ozone, as everybody knows, is ground level ozone, which is created because of the nitrogen oxides that are released in the atmosphere because of human activities, combined with VOCs and sunlight, create ozone. And when I teach ozone to my students, we call this the bad ozone, and the stratospheric ozone up here, we call this the good ozone. So in the troposphere is where all living organisms are found. So we are not the only organisms that are exposed to ground level ozone. Plants are also exposed to ground level ozone. And the ozone actually creates lots of damage to plants. So because it's taken in by the openings in the plant leaves, it actually disrupts photosynthesis. So that's the process that plants use, as I mentioned before, for producing organic molecules, and that's how plants grow, basically. It also may disrupt breathing in plants. Okay, so actually tropospheric ozone slows down the growth of plants, and it increases the risk of catching various diseases, and because their immune systems are weakened, so they're actually more susceptible to different extreme conditions that happen in the environment. And some of the plants, many of them, show these visible marks on them that show that actually this is because of ozone pollution. And this is considered also as a huge, this is a huge area of study as well, because there are very big effects of tropospheric ozone on crops again. So this is a fairly recent paper from 2011, and it says evidence of widespread effects of ozone on crops and on semi-natural vegetation in Europe in the last decades. So ozone causes a serious crop damage, and this also is very important for food security. So this is also considered as one of the major issues for people who deal with the environment. We consider this one of the major issues in relation to impacts on biodiversity. Another aspect of air pollution that has a very serious impact on plants is haze, okay, and particulate matter. And I chose this as well because we have many instances of ozone in Cyprus, and I imagine in the other Mediterranean countries that are participating in the breathing project. And we also have many issues with haze and particulate matter. So if you imagine how, this kind of an environment with haze, where you have a suspension in the atmosphere of different particles that actually cause photochemical smog, is very difficult to see through this haze. And if you think about all the particulate matter that exists in the atmosphere, when this actually comes down, lays down on different surfaces, it also ends up on the surface on the surfaces of plants, and it blocks the openings of the leaves of the plants. So just as particulate matter enters our lungs, well, it enters our airways and it actually coats various parts of our respiratory system, it does the same to plants, basically. So so I thought I had another slide here. By covering the openings on the leaves of the plants, it disrupts, so haze and particulate matter, again, they disrupt breathing in plants, and they disrupt the process of photosynthesis. So again, this has an impact on the yield of plants. It slows down their growth, and in extreme cases, the plants may die as well. So there is also a lot of research on how this also can have an impact on lots of cropland as well. And also, if you think about air pollution on animals, if you notice, I focused mainly on plants because I actually did an extensive search of the literature. Most of the studies that are looking at air pollution and its impact on either plants or animals or fungi or bacteria or other microorganisms, most of them focus on plants. And when they focus on plants, the main focus is on croplands, on crop plants. So the main focus actually is on plants that directly are associated with the human survival. So there are some, but not that many studies on impacts on natural systems. There are, but the focus is on plants that are directly important for human survival. And if you notice, I haven't said that many things about animals because, again, I searched for impacts of air pollution. There was lots of information about the impacts of acid rain on animal populations, but there's not that much information about the impacts of ozone, tropospheric ozone, or of particulate matter on animal populations. There is some information, but not so much. The main bias is towards plants. But in the last few years, there are more increasing studies on animals as well. And the main studies that I found on animals mainly had to do with livestock, cattle, lots of information on cattle and pets. And if you think about the effects, the impacts of, for example, tropospheric ozone and particulate matter on our respiratory systems, the same thing happens to animals. It makes sense. The same types of effects that happen to humans also happen to animals which have similar breathing systems to ours. So, but as I mentioned before, the focus is mainly on animals that directly are of benefit to us, like livestock and pets. But we can very easily assume that air pollution has a very big impact on animal populations as well. And let's not forget that when we are at let's say, the mercy of all this pollution, we at least can be indoors. We have our different, I don't know, air purifiers. We can wear masks. We can do all sorts of things to try to deal with the extent of the pollution that we are living in. But let's not forget that animals and plants are at the mercy of all this pollution that basically that we have released in the environment. So they don't have, it's not so easy for animal and plant and other organisms, for their populations to deal with all these changes that are happening at the moment. In this sense, my research is actually not on air pollution, but at the moment I'm studying, next week a professor is coming from the Netherlands, and we are studying the impacts of climate change on invertebrate populations. And we are actually investigating, we want to see what are the temperature thresholds for some populations to crash. And because today in our workshop we saw that sensor for measuring temperature in the morning when we had our workshop, we actually use that to measure temperature in a forest in Cyprus. And we measured it last summer. And some locations, we measured the surface of the forest floor. We measured the tops of rocks. We measured the small asphalt walkways inside the forest. And in some locations, we measured 70, 80, and up to 90 degrees Celsius, okay? Which was very shocking for us. And we were shocked that actually there were such high temperatures. And then we were trying to imagine how the invertebrates and the animals can deal with these level of temperatures. So this is one of the aspects of research I'm involved in at the moment. So it's important to realize that the status of air quality is actually considered an environmental emergency, because I've looked at lots of literature and it's usually mentioned as a public health emergency. But public health, of course, focuses on human health, but actually the status of air quality is considered an environmental emergency and it affects all organisms on the planet. And because our livelihoods depend on biodiversity, this is actually an issue that we also need to take into account when we are thinking about air quality and air pollution. So I'll finish at this. This was a very brief overview. There's lots more information out there. And I'm just showing you one of my most favorite slides that I tend to show my students when we are talking in class, so that they can realize that the Earth is one planet, it's got its atmosphere, and whatever happens on the planet stays on the planet. So, okay, thank you for your attention. And I don't know if you have any questions or if we should leave them to the end.
So Cristina, would you like actually to lead if we're going to open for questions and answers, or is it going to be at the end?
I think let's keep it at the end to see if we have the time.
Okay.
Perhaps, do you want to proceed with the second presentation and then we will talk a little bit about the project, or you want to talk about the project now and then?
No, I think what we will do then, Cristina, if you are okay, we will proceed with the next speaker, and then at the end, then we open for questions, and then we can also, and then maybe you can talk about the project, since we had, and our apologies for the participants, we had a small glitch in the connection.
Technical issues, yeah.
So our next speaker then is Stavros Stathopoulos. I hope this is how you pronounce it. He's going to tell us about the role of green buildings in promoting sustainable development and human health. About Stavros, a little bit, yes. So he has received his BSc in environmental engineering with a specialization in atmosphere, energy, and climate change from the Department of Environmental Engineering at the Democritus University of Thrace. He continued with his studies. He did a master's in environmental engineering and science with a specialization in atmospheric pollution and anti-pollution technology from the same department. And in 2021, then he completed his PhD at the Laboratory of Atmospheric Pollution and Pollution Control Engineering at the Department of Environmental Engineering at the Democritus University of Thrace. So Stavros' PhD research focused then on the influence of large urban agglomerations on aerosols and clouds with the use of global climate models and remote sensing observations. Stavros has also been involved in numerous national and European research programs He's currently a postdoctoral researcher at the Democritus University of Thrace, where he's developing machine learning and statistical methods in order to downscale remote sensing data. So Stavros, if you can share your screen and share with us then, and so that we can learn a little bit more about the green buildings and how they can affect human health and promote the sustainable development.
Thank you, Edna, for the excellent introduction. I'm honored. I think you can see actually my presentation now. You can, right?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you.
Or
So,
maybe if you can make it a full screen.
yes, of course.
Yeah.
Better now? Yeah. So, I would like to talk about the role of green buildings in promoting sustainable development and human health. So, first of all, we know that buildings represent a large contributor not only to waste production, but to greenhouse gases and other gaseous pollutants emissions. It is also known that they are responsible for various pollution issues. They are responsible for the 36% of the energy consumption and the 37% CO2 emissions that are related with energy production. In addition, they are responsible for the 12% of the freshwater withdrawals and the 13% of the consumption of raw materials. Buildings are also generate nearly 20% of water effluents and 45 to 65% of landfill wastes. So you can understand how important it is to find a way to reduce those impacts in the environment. A way of doing so is to make them greener. But what is a green building? Actually, there is no solid definition of what a building, how a building is considered green, but there are a lot of suggestions, and all of these suggestions include the fact that a green building is an important and a widely accepted concept, aiming to promote sustainable implementation of buildings throughout their life cycle. And a green building should emphasize to conserve the resources that is constructed by or the resources that use in its lifetime, to protect the environment, to reduce the pollution that probably during its lifetime creates, and to be designed in a healthy indoor management way so the occupants have a better life. To do so, to recognize what if a building is green and if it is not, there are some tools, the so-called green building rating tools, that are used to assess how sustainable a building behave according to different sustainable requirements. There are a lot of tools. For example, at the bottom of the slide, you can see 6 of the most common used green building rating systems: the LEED, the WELL, the FitWell, the BREEAM, the Green Star, the DGNB. There are a lot more, but every one of those take into account local geography, climatic conditions, and cultural characteristics of the area that the building is structured or constructed. So all of those systems share some common elements, and based on those elements, the respective green building rating tools are defined and used in each case. So, what is the role of the green building in the sustainable development goals that we all know? There are 70 of them. A green building has a great impact on most of them, either strongly or in a weaker way. Actually, they can have an impact on 9 of those sustainable development goals: the good health and well-being, the clean water and sanitation, the affordable and clean energy, the decent water and economic growth, the industry and innovation infrastructure, and the other 4, 11, 12, 13, and 15. How is the question? Actually, in different ways, but all of those ways contribute to the environmental protection of the environment and to succeed in those sustainable goals. So, regarding SDG 3, can promote physical and mental health and reduce pollution caused death and illnesses. How they do that? By improving indoor air quality, reducing the percentage of workers, if we talk about offices and organizations that take absence due to health problems, and by the proper design of the environment, the occupants and the workers can be more productive. According to SDG 6, they can improve water quality and water efficiency. They integrate management of water resources in a more effective way and protect water-related ecosystems by minimizing the stress that those ecosystems can suffer from uncontrolled water contamination or management. 2 ways that green buildings can succeed in this is harvesting the rainwater so as to be able to use it in other forms of uses, and the grey water recycling. According to regarding SDG 7, they can access modern energy services such as solar energy or wind energy. They use a larger proportion of the kind of energy than the original traditional buildings that use coal and energy that is produced by coal. So they are more efficient in energy consumption. In SDG 8, they can promote productivity through diversity and innovation, promote production activities and innovation, which is similar to the first action, the first target, but there are some differences as well. And they can help decoupling economic growth and environmental degradation. How? By boosting local economic growth, since these buildings can use resources from the local environment, and those buildings are implemented in a more efficient way in the locals in the local environment, and provide new job opportunities because this economic growth can create more jobs and helping the citizens of those areas, of those regions. When we speak about SDG 9, the infrastructure is based on sustainability, and the modern infrastructure and higher resource efficiency is one of the key elements that characterize them as green buildings. So they succeed in these targets by having a resilient infrastructure from the time that they are designed till the time that the end user will occupy them, promote sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation, because in every steps during the construction process, new ideas will probably come up to make this building more efficient, energetic as far as energy is concerned, and more efficient in environmental protection. SDG 11 is another action that green buildings have a strong effect and can help us succeed in this target by participatory, integrated, and sustainable settlement planning. The right planning of during the construction of not only for one green building, but a whole, let's say, town, green town, which is a dream, is to be able to face some various disasters that will come up, reduce urban pollution, and be able to adapt to climate changes. How? By using sustainable materials that they don't have a ecological footprint, or their footprint is limited, by optimizing energy and water usage, and by integrating renewable energy technologies into those building designs. At SDG 12, the green building utilize natural resources. They make it's a friendly environment that is treat chemicals and waste in more efficient way that is environmental friendly. There is the reduction of the waste production, and promote the sustainability development awareness to the citizens by using sustainable materials and consume fewer non-renewable resources. And of course, we know that recycle is one of the main actions that we can do to remain sustainable and to succeed in a sustainable development way of life. Climate action. Green buildings are flexible and adaptable, as we said before, and by using the right measures and the right techniques, not only during their construction procedure, but during how they, during their lifetime, can produce, can be climate sustainable. They can use less energy and employ renewable energy sources and materials that are eco-friendly. And of course, can reduce emissions and waste. Finally, the SDG 15 which is also an important action, an important goal. The green buildings are protecting land and freshwater ecosystems because they are environmental friendly. The materials that are constructed are environmental friendly, and they can have a better water consumption management. They preserve the soil quality, and sometimes they can be natural habitat for the microorganisms and insects and birds that live nearby. Don't forget that green buildings can incorporate features such as green roofs or vertical gardens, which can be which can be a habitat for those animals and species. And they help the ecosystem by biodiversity in the decision-making process, because they decrease the pressure on natural ecosystems by reducing energy and water consumption and can create green spaces. So this is the one aspect of the green buildings during their construction and lifetime period. Another important factor is what happens inside a green building. So the indoor environmental quality is also an important factor that in green buildings is very important. Actually, the indoor air quality is influenced by three primary factors: the pollutants that are generated indoors, either from some human activities such as cooking, or the products that he uses. The pollutants that generated outdoors but can invade, let's say, our indoor place, such as fire smoke, the air pollutants, the exhaust from traffic, and the building system itself, and the conditions that are produced by those building systems that can act either to mitigate or exacerbate these exposures. For example, ventilation or filtration. And this is very important because if the indoor air quality is very pure, so this can lead to acute effects or chronic effects. Acute effects like fatigue or irritations, headaches, and chronic effects like asthma or even cancer if there are if the habitats, if the occupants of the building come across with some very toxic gases or some ingredients. So it's very important. There are some aspects of a green building of the building to be efficient in ventilation. Ventilation is a very important aspect because it creates healthy indoor air quality, because it regulates the air velocity, the temperature, relative humidity, and in a way regulates the concentration of the air contaminants inside the place, because a poor ventilation can have some effects such as headaches, fatigue, respiratory problems, and some eye and nose irritations. Thermal comfort, which is another aspect that we should have in mind. And green buildings, if it is considered a green building, thermal comfort is one of the aspects that is more efficient. It is influenced by temperature, airspeed, humidity, and personal metabolic activity, and clothing-induced thermal insulation. The thermal discomfort, if there is none, thermal comfort, can have a detrimental effect on performance of the occupants. And if we talk about universities or schools or classrooms, the learning ability of the students, the health effects of thermal discomfort are watery eyes, headaches, throat irritation, respiratory systems, and negative moods to the occupants. In addition, moisture. Moisture is another important factor. It enters usually buildings through some envelope openings. It can be created due condensation on cold surfaces. Can be created due to poor maintained drain ponds and an inadequate ventilation. This excess moisture could be very dangerous because it can lead to mold growth, causing asthma, allergic symptoms, and respiratory effects, which in turn impacts the productivity, the learning capabilities, and quality of life of the occupants or the residents. Lighting has visual and not visual effects on human health. Even the visual is, there are irritations, and blurred vision, and non-visual that we cannot see can affect the circadian misalignment and metabolic disorders. But if we have appropriate light exposure in timing, duration, spectrum, and density, this can enhance the alertness and can increase productivity. This is the goal in green buildings. Noise, another important factor, is can cause loss of concentration, of course, sleep disruption, stress, and sometimes cardiovascular diseases. Especially when we talk about residents, the nocturnal noise can affect deep sleep and is associated with a higher propensity of wakefulness, which is even common, even more nowadays. So to conclude, I know I took a lot of time, sorry for that. The green buildings benefits are that green buildings are have high energy performance. They can manage in the right way water and conserve the water ecosystems, can reduce energy consumption by up to 40%, reducing at the same time the CO2 emissions. The waste recycle rate can reach more than 90%, contribute to urban biodiversity enhancement and ecosystem conservation because they in the scope of creating green buildings, we also create gardens, we also create parks. They achieve higher levels of indoor environmental quality and thus improve the health of occupants and increase user satisfaction. In addition, the occupants, many research have shown that are more emotionally stable than those who live in traditional buildings because the indoor air quality is better. The residents have 6% higher sleep quality than those in non-certified buildings. And the green building applications can control indoor air pollutants. Thank you very much for your attention. I don't know if you have any questions.
Thank you for interesting presentation, Stavros. Maybe Edna, we could begin a little bit a session with questions.
I think so. So we can open for questions then to both Iris and Stavros.
I have a question for Stavros.
And I have a question for Iris.
Thank you, Stavro. It was actually very interesting. Again, I learned many things because it's not my subject area. I just wanted to ask you then, how widespread are these kind of green buildings in Greece? Are people taking this up? And is it mostly, let's say, office buildings or private individuals?
Well, they are not so common in Greece, but in a sense that a green building is defined. Actually, now it's starting to develop this kind of idea, but many buildings here have a lot of balconies with a lot of plants, so it became greener and greener. But if we take green building in the definition that we said, the most cases are industries and buildings and the offices, because they use it as a commercial mean to be that this industry, that this office is more green, and so they are more appeal to the public. They are using it in this way.
Thank you. Can I ask a follow-up for this? Thank you. And because you said there are many criteria, you said that there are these different, you said mentioned 6, I don't remember the names, for defining if a building is green. How can someone, how does someone choose which one?
The building systems, the green building rating systems. Actually, it depends. It depends on the country, in the continent. For example, the most common is the LEED green building rating system and the WELL, because those are referred to United States of America and Europe. There are those systems related to Asian population. It has to do, as I said, to geographical conditions. There's no way to have the same criteria to India, which is a developing country, with Germany, which has a different economy and different possibility to promote that kind of actions. So they choose from those factors and edit it, let's say, to create a tool which is based in different systems. Okay, if I may ask you, Iris, about your presentation, I would like to, it was very interesting, of course, and how about, I would like to ask you, how about the marine ecosystems? And I'm not referring only to coral reefs, I'm referring to fishes. And I'm referring, if there is a connection between air pollution and migration of species that can affect the biodiversity of a region.
Oh, okay, thank you. That's actually a very nice question. Well, it would affect them in different ways. For example, when the temperature, the average temperature of the oceans is increasing, it means that it's going to affect different levels in the food web. So I'll just say, for example, with the coral systems, if the coral systems are collapsing, which is what's happening, that also affects the fish that live in the coral systems. So in that sense, the whole ecosystem is being affected because of the rise in temperature. That's one way. Another issue is because of climate change, because of the ocean currents. For example, there is the gray conveyor belt, which actually carries warm water to the North and the South Pole. And then from the North and the South Pole, you have the deep water that comes to the equator. That's called the big ocean current. It's called the thermoset. It's driven by differences in temperature between the poles and the equator. And because the level of because the difference is becoming less because of climate change, it's actually disrupting this movement of ocean currents. And actually many of the marine organisms, they depend on their livelihood on these currents and also on their migration. So because these ocean currents, many systems are being disrupted, it's actually going to disrupt the migration patterns of many species. And then that's going to have a big impact on different food webs in different parts of the ocean. And then that will also affect fish populations, but at different levels of the food web. I don't know if that answered your question, but I think that maybe you were thinking of fisheries as well, how the fisheries are going to be impacted from humans.
Actually, if the fishes are impacted, the fisheries are connected, so they're impacted as well.
Yeah.
No, I was referring to the ecosystem, the marine ecosystem only, the fishes. So you covered my point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So Edna?
Go ahead, Cristina.
Okay, thank you all for being here. I do apologize, but we have several technical issues, namely the loss of connections, mobile connections, and so on. So thank you everyone for being present in the fourth webinar, breathing webinar. And let me just say that breathing is reaching almost the end of the first webinar cycle. We are going to have 2 more until the end of June, and then we are going to stop and then begin later on during this year another webinar cycle. Hopefully then we will have more results from the project in order for conveying the dissemination of some preliminary results and discuss ideas how to improve certain things that we might find during the morning, during the symposium. Sandra and Hermano showed already some results related to the monitoring program that we are preparing in all 4 institutions. Therefore, by the end of this year, for sure, we will have more detailed results to present you all and to discuss further ideas and proposals for mitigating some of the problems that for sure we are going to encounter. I do not know if you were present during the morning, but Sandra showed us a little petri dish with some pink content with fungi there, and we hopefully the fungi are not harmful for our health, but it was very interesting to find out that even her giving lectures in the room, one of the rooms that is already being monitored, that she was not aware of the problems that they have found in that room, namely regarding illuminance and CO2. So it is very interesting now, even though they are experimenting the equipment, because the equipment is new, of course, they are already reaching some considerations. So it will be very interesting for sure. And hopefully, Edna, we can convey more information a few months from now. Thank you, Edna.
Yeah. I think just before we finish this session then is if you would like to join us tomorrow for the second day of our symposium, yes, where we are going to have then a roundtable discussion on indoor air quality and health and well-being. We are going to have another lecture, another presentation by Dr. Saris on modeling. And we will have also some very interesting, which is one of our deliverables also, which is going to be presented by Cristina on projections of how our weather, how our climate is going to change in Cyprus, in Greece, and also in the Iberic region. Yeah? So join us tomorrow as well if you are available.
You
And-
have a link on the website. Sorry, Edna, for interrupting you. You have a link, and it is necessary for you to register in order to access.
Yes, you just need basically to add your name, your email, and the other options the other parts are optional, and you are going to get the link then to join us tomorrow. Yeah, so thank you very much, and thank you all for being here with us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.